I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel sends help in the wake of Hurricane Irma. The Israeli Prime Minister sets off a historic trip to Latin America. And we hope you're ready to start binging because we have the scoop on the latest Netflix series, which has been filmed entirely in the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Today marks the 16th anniversary of the deadly September 11th terror attacks, and the world is sharing a moment of silence to commemorate the nearly 3,000 Americans who lost their lives on that fateful morning. Thousands have just gathered at Ground Zero as President Trump led a moment of silence at the White House to mark the anniversary. U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman has just joined nearly 500 Israelis in the Jerusalem Hills, lending solemn words of support to the Jewish state.
And so on September 11th, 2001, instead of Americans mourning for Israel, Israel mourned for us. Israel mourned for America. How the world changed that day. Israel mourned for the new reality that terrorism was no longer contained to the Middle East. It mourned the new reality that its greatest friend and closest ally had suffered in a manner that Israelis knew all too well.
Pledging that the United States will always stand with Israel to fight extremism on all fronts, it's clear that wounds are fresh even 16 years after that tragic morning. Hurricane Irma continues its deadly rampage across the state of Florida after claiming at least 26 lives. The massive storm has triggered one of the biggest evacuations in American history, and now Israel has just dispatched a rescue team to southern Florida, all on a mission to provide life-saving aid to the millions who have been left without power and water. Irma is the 7th strongest storm to ever make landfall on U.S. soil and comes a mere month after Hurricane Harvey ravaged Texas and the Gulf Coast. This makes 2017 the first year on record in which 2 Category 4 hurricanes have hit the country. Irma was a Category 5 record when it hit Cuba and then made landfall on South Florida over the weekend. President Trump declared a state of emergency ahead of the storm, which has now left nearly 4 million Floridians without power. Major flooding, storm surges, and even tornadoes have devastated the Panhandle, even as Irma has now weakened to a tropical storm. But the storm shows little signs of slowing down. It's now heading for North Florida and then up to Georgia. After last week's successful test of a hydrogen bomb, the world's leaders are scrambling for solutions to limit North Korea's nuclear power. Israel, meanwhile, is becoming increasingly worried about seeing a similar situation arise in Iran, although Germany's chancellor has suggested that a nuclear deal like the one with Iran could defuse the situation in North Korea. Right now, the United States is bringing an emergency vote to the floor of the United Nations to place massive new sanctions against North Korea, all in hopes of weakening its leader, Kim Jong-un. While the exact terms are still classified, a draft proposal last week included freezing all of the North Korean dictator's foreign assets, banning all oil and natural gas imports into the country, and cutting an embargo on all North Korean textile sales. If passed, these would be the harshest sanctions yet by far and could certainly cripple the North Korean economy. Even with North Korea promising dire consequences against the, quote, thirsty beast of the United States, many at the UN fear that sanctions have proven ineffective in halting nuclear power. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has offered to place North Korea under a deal similar to the Iranian nuclear deal, but Israel's intelligence minister is now calling on President Trump to change that deal completely, warning that the Islamic nation is positioning itself to be a nuclear superpower as soon as the deal expires. Global intelligence has long suspected Iran of actually helping North Korea develop its nuclear arsenal, meaning North Korea may be in line to return the favor. Israel has seen a surge of Iranian influence all over the region, including thousands of soldiers stationed in Syria, and nuclear warheads are the last thing Israel wants to see added to the equation. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife Sarah have just left Israel for a 10-day tour of Latin America, the first ever for a sitting Israeli prime minister. Now, many are calling this a historic trip, although it comes amidst a growing cloud of corruption scandals for both the prime minister and his wife. With us in the studio is ILTV's Aaron Porras. Now, Aaron, what do you think? Is there any significance to the timing here?
I have to say that I believe no. You know, this trip has been planned for months and months, and it's unlikely that there was any sort of correlation between, Prime Minister Netanyahu going off to, on a goodwill trip to Latin America and criminal investigations. That being said, you're not alone in suspecting that there's some sort of, weird trickery afoot with Sarah Netanyahu a day after being notified of her indictment, traveling with the Prime Minister to Latin America. But again, I think that these are pretty coincidental.
All right, well, let's check out your report.
The Netanyahu spoke with reporters just before their flight took off, with Sarah thanking those supporting her during this controversial time.
כן, אני רוצה גם תודה, אני רוצה להגיד משהו, ובאמת אני רוצה להגיד תודה לאלפי אלפי אלפי אזרחים ישראלים ואנשים גם בכל רחבי העולם שתומכים בי ועוזרים ומעודדים, ואני רוצה להגיד שבימים טובים ובימים פחות טובים העזרה שלכם והתמיכה שלכם נותנת לי כוח להמשיך לעשות כל הדברים האמיתיים שאני עושה.
For the Prime Minister, this mission to Latin America holds promising new relations with Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico, which was just hit with a deadly earthquake. But perhaps one of the biggest items on his itinerary is a meeting with President Trump just ahead of the United Nations General Assembly, their first face-to-face since May. Rumor has it that Trump will also be meeting with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas at the event as well, in hopes of pushing ahead with landing the ultimate deal for Middle East peace. Needless to say, these will be a very busy 10 days.
Well, joining us now to discuss the Prime Minister's visit in Latin America is Ambassador Yosef Livni, who has served extensively in the region as a former ambassador to El Salvador, Belize, and Mexico. All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
You're the right guy to have here right now.
Yeah,
so the Prime Minister will be visiting Argentina and Mexico. Now, why are these the two Latin American countries that he has decided to visit?
Well, I think, first of all, he's going to be in Colombia for a few hours as well, I think. The point is that both Argentina and Mexico are outstanding nations in the continent. They're not, by any stretch of the imagination, the only important ones. Mm-hmm. There's Brazil, there's Chile, there's Peru.
Right.
But Argentina and Mexico are certainly two of the most important countries.
Well, obviously, there was a spat with Brazil regarding the ambassador situation. Yeah. So that's not going to happen. But, obviously there was some tension between Mexico and Israel at a certain point. But now, is that water under the bridge?
We'll have to wait and see. I assume that knowing the Mexicans the way I do, I don't think the Mexican government would have welcomed a visit if they considered the issue to be somewhat alive.
Right.
But I'm going back. Remember, Argentina is the first nation in Latin America where Israel opened an embassy. Right. Way back.
It's important to keep in mind.
The biggest Jewish community in the continent is in Latin America. It's a very important.
Well, and the current president, Mauricio Macri,
is very pro-Israeli.
Exactly.
Yes, unlike his predecessor. So.
Which changes things on the ground, certainly. Yeah. And this is the first visit that a sitting prime minister of Israel has made to the region. Why is that happening right now?
I think this is a question that many have asked that question for many years. Myself, when I was ambassador to Mexico, and many of my colleagues who were ambassadors to equally important nations, we always looked forward to a visit by a ranking official. Mm-hmm. So presidents have visited, foreign ministers have visited. Prime ministers, for some reason, never made it that far. Remember, going to Latin America is not something that you go, it's not hop, skip, and a jump. You have to plan ahead and you have to spend some time. And maybe prime ministers
I mean, we're also, not necessarily counting in a lot of the issues that the general public within Latin America have with Israel as a country. I mean, I was seeing just on social media a series of videos that people were putting up from Argentina regarding the visit of the Prime Minister. Not everybody within the Argentinian public, maybe the leader himself is in support of Israel, has the same sentiments towards the state of Israel. We're seeing growing anti-Semitism in Latin America. So I think this is kind of a very interesting time. Now, what can we expect from these visits when the Prime Minister finally
First of
arrives?
all, I think it sends a message, you are important to us.
Right.
It's a message to the Latin American countries. And remember, the anti-Israeli sentiments, you can find them in Europe, you can find them anywhere around the world, even in the US. So that's not an issue. The issue is, I think we're sending a message to Latin America. You are important. We have worked for so many years, and now the visit of a Prime Minister seals the message, as it were. You are important. We want to develop our ties with you. There are a million areas we can work together on for the benefits of both you and us.
Well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens on the
Exactly.
ground. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador
you.
Livni. All right, we've seen reports over the last few weeks of shifting priorities and strategies within Hamas. But now the head of the Shin Bet is saying that the terror group is gearing up for war, and with the support of Iran, is even setting up a base in Lebanon. 3 years after the last war with Israel, Hamas now finds itself at a turning point. As evident by the disastrous conditions in Gaza, the terror group is determined to rearm itself and put all its resources into a future war with Israel, even at the cost of harming its own citizens. At the same time, Hamas may not be strategically ready for combat with its resources and leadership spread very thin. But the head of the Shin Bet, Nadav Argaman, believes that things are ramping up in Hamas even as we speak, and that the terror group is not only ready for war, but has even spread into Lebanon and is now setting up a new military base over there. That's because Iran has quickly become the leading financer of Hamas's efforts to destroy the Jewish state, even using its influence to allow Hamas to build inside Lebanese territory. This is on top of at least 2 missile factories Iran is believed to be building in South Lebanon, and dozens of reports of Iranian weapon shipments being smuggled into Hezbollah in the region. Last March, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that Iran was responsible for 80% of Israeli security concerns, and from the sound of this, that figure isn't far off. With the growing threat of Iran mounting on all sides, Israel is looking at a potentially devastating conflict on the horizon, but it looks like Israel may need some help. The IDF's former deputy chief of staff has just told an American security conference in Washington that Israel cannot fight alone. Major General Yair Golan attended the council with top U.S. military minds at the request of Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. After acknowledging Iran's advanced infrastructure and even commending the Arab nation's progressive schools, industries, and talented youth, the Major General noted that the country was actually similar to Israel in many ways, and that these similarities were what posed the most dangerous threat of all. For decades, we've dealt with ISIS-style terrorism. I don't say it's not a problem, but we managed to live with that. But when looking at the Iranian threat, it's much more dangerous compared to the ISIS threat, Golan told the council. The former IDF chief openly admitted that a direct military confrontation with Iran would be beyond Israel's capability, which is why Israel needs American help as well as in the war to come. It's becoming increasingly clear that Israel may find itself in an armed conflict with Iran in the future, which means the army will need to be ready at any moment. Now, following the troubling results of a study on sexual abuse among Arab boys in Israel, Tel Aviv has just opened its first ever assault hotline in Arabic for Arab men seeking help. With us is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith on the story. Now, Brett, what was the initial research that led to this hotline?
Thank you, Natasha. Well, last year, Haifa University made some very troubling finds. Now, they reported that nearly 30% of Arab boys surveyed in Israel had been sexually assaulted, and that's compared to 17 or 18% of Arab girls or even just Jewish children who reported being assaulted like that. Now, while these are all terrible numbers, the study concluded that Arab boys were actually 60% more likely to face sexual assault than any other demographic in Israel.
I mean, it's awful. And so this new Arabic hotline is a response to this study specifically?
Correct. Right.
Okay.
So the Tel Aviv Sexual Assault Crisis Center processed the data from the research, and they decided to open a hotline in Arabic exclusively for Arab and Palestinian men facing sexual assault. Now, as you know, male sexuality, and especially male homosexuality, is an extremely taboo subject in the Arab world. And that's why so many cases of sexual assault go unreported, particularly among Arab men. And that's why this hotline is just so important right now, as you'll see just now in the report. The Tel Aviv Sexual Assault Crisis Center has just opened its first ever Arabic hotline for Arab men who are victims of sexual assault. While similar hotlines for Arab women and Jewish victims can be found throughout Israel, help for Arab men is incredibly rare. That's because male sexuality and homosexuality is an especially forbidden topic in Arab and Palestinian society, which explains why there isn't even just one hotline for male sexual abuse victims anywhere in the Arab world. In the largest study ever of its kind, Haifa University's testimonials revealed that Arab boys were 60% more likely to face sexual assault than any other demographic in the country. This new hotline hopes to offer critical help to victims living in silence. The service operates pro bono without funding or support, run only by its Jewish founder and a single Palestinian volunteer who mans the phone lines. For the moment, the hotline is only open for a limited 3-hour window, one night a week, at least until more Arab-speaking volunteers step forward to help. The hotline helps connect victims with all kinds of therapy, treatment, and even long-term rehabilitation. But perhaps more importantly, it offers the first and perhaps only sympathetic ear to victims who desperately need it.
Guess what? We're not the only ones going on vacation. So is Israel's ultra-Orthodox community, but it's not always easy given religious restrictions. Well, joining me now in the studio is Daphna Cohen, the owner and marketing manager of Tor Plus, a vacation company catering to this very issue. Now, thank you so much for joining us. What is Tor Plus?
Tor Plus is the leader and the biggest company for the kosher market all over the world. We're doing a lot of things. Part of them, it's our hotel abroad in Europe that we are kosherize them and rent them for the season of the summertime or Pesach and make them kosher at all.
Interesting. So it's kosher. Okay, so you guys essentially set up hotels to be kosher friendly to ultra-Orthodox visitors.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, and
for
so
all kind of kosher markets,
right?
From United States, from Europe, from Israel.
Interesting. Interesting. So do the ultra-Orthodox, I guess, tourists that work with you, do they come to you and they set up trips with you?
Yeah, we are doing everything. We are doing a package deal with the daily excursions and everything, and also a regular hotel because we rent the hotel, make it kosher, completely, strictly kosher in the best way, but in a high standard of culinary standard with a good service.
Interesting.
So they can feel a regular hotel.
So what are the vacation spots that your company offers?
For example, this summer we have been in Villa in Switzerland.
In Switzerland,
three months. This is from the glacier, from the snow.
Beautiful.
And we have been in Portugal. We have been in 2 months in Austria, in Kaprun, Salzburg,
I think
and
it's
Italy,
really,
North Italy.
Yeah, of course. I think this is a very interesting thing that you're doing here because, you know, there's not that many options for ultra-Orthodox people who are traveling.
Also,
to be able to set this up
regular kosher.
Yeah, also not just ultra-Orthodox,
but the ultra-Orthodox,
exactly.
all the crowds.
So what is the average cost of this stay at one of these kosher inns?
There is a lot of options. They can come to 2 days, for a week, for every time.
And is it group travel, or can you?
There is a group travel, the individual travel. There is everything. Also from Israel with flight. Also from abroad, they came by themselves, and we offer them what they want. A family vacation, couples vacation, everything. Also in Passover, in Pesach, we are doing it also in Israel and in Europe.
Okay, great. So for the viewers that we have that might want to use your company, how can they find you? Is there a website?
Of course, there is a website, Tor Plus, very known. We have a website and all kinds of situation. They can contact us by phone, by
And is there
mail.
a trip that they should be looking forward to that's coming up in the future?
Of course, we are now planning all the year. Of course, we are doing Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot in Israel, not abroad. But Pesach will be a very big celebration in Europe.
Yeah,
in
Pesach
Barcelona.
is Passover, yes.
Yeah, in Barcelona and a lot of other places in Europe. And also we are planning the next summer now.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Daphne Cohen.
Thank you.
And for those of our religious and ultra-Orthodox viewers, check out her company.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. Israel's Environmental Protection Agency has just delivered some very good news. Pollution from factories is down across the board all over Israel. New government mandates have placed strict limits on emissions, and many factories are now required to switch over to natural gas, and it looks like all of the effort is actually paying off. The ministry's annual report reveals a huge drop in volatile pollution levels, especially from Israeli industrial factories and waste treatment plants. Certain hazardous chemicals have dropped 17%, with others slashed by a whopping 48%. That's extremely good news for Israel's natural environment, especially its waters, beaches, and air, which have had severe problems with pollution over the last 20 years. In fact, and here's the bad news, even with these drops, Israel is still very low on the world's environmentally friendly list. The tiny Jewish state actually makes pollution at a rate 3 times worse than any country in the European Union. That's because Israel's natural gas plants are in dire need of treatment, and the country's dependency on 2 coal-fueled power plants in Hadera and Ashkelon. Non-methane gas is actually on the rise in Israel due to these plants, with dangerous nitrogen and sulfur oxides continuing to flood Israel's environment. While this latest drop in certain toxins is certainly something to celebrate, scientists say Israel still has a long way to go to clean up its act. Well, it's a good start at least. All right, Netflix has certainly been no stranger to Israeli TV shows and has already snapped up hit Israeli series like Fauda, Prisoners of War, and Mossad 101. But for the first time ever, Netflix has not only made an American remake of an Israeli show, but actually filmed it completely in Israel.
41-year-old Ryan Woods is about to make history as the first female astronaut to orbit the moon.
It's just a short trip around the moon. Look after.
Now that's a quick look at the trailer for Greenhouse Academy, Netflix's newest series, and it premiered on the streaming giant just a few days ago. It's based on Hachamama, or Greenhouse, which was originally an Israeli series from acclaimed showrunner Gira Chamitzer. The American version follows a group of teens from rivaling dorms at an elite futuristic boarding school in Southern California. But wait, look closely at the background. Looks familiar? That's because they actually shot the entire series here in Israel. And so, no, those aren't the sunny beaches of Malibu. That's the Palmachim beach just south of Tel Aviv. The deal has been in the works with Netflix for over 2.5 years now, and plans came together very quickly to produce the first 2 seasons entirely in Israel. Casting was done in both Israel and the United States, with Israeli-American Ariel Mortman landing one of the lead roles. And the production went all out to tweak every Israeli location and make it feel a little more American, right down to the height of the bunk beds and the electrical sockets. All 24 episodes of Greenhouse Academy are streaming right now on Netflix, so if you're looking for something to binge, why not give it a try?
Welcome to the greenhouse.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Since you're currently watching it, we thought it would only be appropriate for today's word to be televizia, which means TV in Hebrew. Yes, that's right, televizia and television sound pretty similar, which makes this word a lot easier to remember. And it's an important one since, according to studies, the average American adult watches 5 hours and 4 minutes of televizia a day. We like to think that television is simply an automated form of daydreaming, but don't get us wrong, it's really important to experience reality as well. So here's our advice: turn on your televizia just once a day, when Israel Daily comes on, obviously. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Thanks to the heat wave floating over the Mediterranean right now, tonight should be clear and with a rise in temperatures to a minimum of 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect the peak of the heat wave to hit with temperatures rising as high or higher than 91 or 33 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.52 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for watching.